Everybody. Good morning from me. I'm in New York, so good afternoon to those of you who are in other parts of the world. Um, and thank you so much for joining us. We are, you know, it's an interesting time for us to be doing this. First of all, it's Thanksgiving morning here in the US, which just kind of feels like a very interesting day to be hosting. A discussion and a talk and an intimate talk about about colonization and occupation um, and then it's also been almost 6 weeks into this horrific genocide happening in Gaza, and with everything that's happened since October 7th, there's just been obviously a lot of rage and anger and panic and concern worldwide. I've been in the US now for about a month, and honestly, it's a very palpable kind of fear and energy around what's happening. So I'm just going to give us just a little bit of an overview of how all this came to be in terms of AFF's participation. And I want to explain a little bit about what today's conversation is about. So, we have a speaker series that we launched earlier this year. And really the intention of the speaker series was to be able to invite people whose journeys have been interesting to us, who have kind of a perspective that might be interesting to highlight across this sector around philanthropy, innovation, social impact. And so the intention of the speaker series is normally to be just kind of like a one-on-one conversation. And if you joined our first episode of the speaker series earlier this year, we had Reem Khouri with us. More personal conversation. So it's intended to be a little bit different than a webinar. It's supposed to be a little bit different than a panel. So that's kind of the idea behind it. And for today, you'll notice we have two guests with us. And there's a very particular reason for why we've chosen to do that, because this issue is obviously very critical. And starting from October 7th, we immediately had just a barrage of people asking questions about what can we do, where can we go, how can we help, how can we fund, how can we support. And we thought that this would be a really kind of critical time to bring on two of our partners and AFF members who immediately responded to this issue. So Taawon, Aida Essaid from Taawon and Muna Abbas from Asfari Foundation were two of the people who literally, I think on October 7th in the afternoon, we were already texting each other, like, what are we going to do? How are we going to address this? And Muna came up with the idea of, is it possible for us to just galvanize a group of donors, even if it's 2 or 3 immediately, donors and partners who are on the ground currently in Gaza, who can do something and respond instantly. So we kind of mobilized, incredibly quickly. And I think by day 5, we had already gone live with our donor appeal. So I want to explain very briefly what the donor appeal was and why it was structured the way that it was. So we were very interested and wanted to make sure that if we were going to be recommending to people where to put your money, we wanted to make sure that it was accessible immediately. We wanted to make sure that it would be instantly accessible to the community that needed it. We were still very early in this crisis. We didn't really know how it would escalate, but we were certain it would escalate. I think that it has escalated beyond anybody's imagination. But we wanted to make sure that we weren't looking at aid that was going to be stuck at a border, waiting for people to be able to get through, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why we brought together Taawon and the United Palestinian Appeal and the American Friends Service Committee, which is the Quaker Friends, who have been in Gaza since 1949. Taawon has been in Gaza for many, many years, and Aida will give us more information about that. United Palestinian Appeal. So all of these folks are running organizations. A, they happen to be Palestinian, if not half Palestinian. B, they were already on the ground, and they had been able to mobilize very quickly and had folks who were already there in Gaza ready to to address, is the immediate needs of their community during this crisis. So that's kind of why those were the three that we launched the campaign with. Following that, we also realized, we have members in Gaza, specifically Tawasul, and we'd been in touch with them and I'd continue to be in touch with them every single day to check in on our colleague there, Ammar Marwan. And, Tawasul is a very small community-based foundation, doesn't necessarily have the visibility and the platform to fundraise the way that other bigger, larger organizations do. And we wanted to make sure that Tawasul was able to also receive some of the donations so that Tawasul would also have the opportunity to provide humanitarian relief to their community. So AFF, as a 501c3 registered in the US, decided to host a pooled fund where any individual donations or people who would prefer to make their donations to community-based foundations would send their donations to us, and then we would be able to hold those donations for the time being and then distribute them as needed to Tawasul. And then by extension, Tawasul is going to extend and disperse that, that aid to 6 additional community-based foundations in Gaza. So that's kind of where we are. The third reaction and an activity that AFF launched as well was, on the heels of the Turkey-Syria earthquake, the Libya flooding, and then now this Gaza crisis, we realized that a lot of our members are engaged either directly or tangentially in humanitarian relief and really wanted to have a little bit more of a systematic way to be able to address humanitarian crises as they happen, rather actually before they happen, rather than having to kind of mobilize every time there's a crisis. So we've launched a humanitarian relief and recovery task force that will meet for the first time in January. We've invited anyone who's interested in joining this task force to join us. And really the aim of the task force ultimately is just to be able to mitigate some of these crises before they happen, to do a little bit of what we call like a forensic accounting of what's required during these crises so that we can mobilize resources more quickly. So that's the overview. What I'm going to do now is actually just open this conversation. I'm going to invite Muna Abbas first to come on. Muna is the CEO of the Asfari Foundation, a charity registered in the UK. I will let Muna give us a little bit more about kind of the background of Asfari and why this was an important initiative for Asfari to get involved with. So Muna, unmute and let's have a conversation.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending on where you are in the world. And it's a privilege to be here with you today. And thank you, Naila, for organizing this and hosting us. Thanks for our guests as well to be here with us. And thanks to Aida as well to be. I'm happy to be with you here, even through these difficult times. But at least we have the opportunity to talk and to express our feelings and to talk about how we can support through our different capacities and abilities. As Naila mentioned in the beginning, since the beginning of this war on Gaza, we knew that this is going to be different. And if we have learned anything in this region, at least my generation, who has witnessed number of wars and so far, that we learned that the Israeli military operations have been always marked as revengeful and unproportionate on both nature and scale. So we needed to do something, and we are currently witnessing the deliberate killing of thousands of Palestinian civilians who have been under siege for more than 17 years so far. In these 17 years, they have been striving with the bare minimum to build a decent life for themselves and for their children in one of the world's most densely populated areas. And for those who don't know Gaza, or maybe even if we know, it's good to remind ourselves that Gaza has 8 Palestinian refugee camps that are accommodating thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of refugees. And according to the honor with data. 80% of the population in Gaza Strip, it's not the city of Gaza, generally, the population of Gaza, which is around 2.1 million people, 80% of them are Palestinian refugees. And if you wonder why are they called Palestinian refugees in Palestinian territories, because we need to remember that those refugees themselves or their parents or their grandparents were forced to leave their destroyed and demolished cities and towns and villages during the initial ethnic cleansing conducted by Israel upon its establishment in 1948. This is a living history that we need to remember every time we talk about the Palestinian conflict and the crisis. This living history is still under making, and we can witness now in 2023 what's going on. The Israeli military is committing a second wave of ethnic cleansing by the systematic targeting of crucial social institutions essential for Palestinian survival, especially during wartime. So hospitals, schools, mosques, churches are continuously attacked. And these institutions are not only for the services that they are providing, they are used in wartime as shelters for people to run away and to hide and to seek refuge from the bombing and from the ongoing war. So the destruction of these institutions are contributing to the plan and to the ethnic cleansing that is going on. So even when this war stops and when it ceases, there will be nothing left for Palestinians to go back to. And because not only their homes, but their essential community establishments. And if this is not ethnic cleansing, it's a war crime, it's ethnic cleansing. And it is time to call it by name. We have to address these issues and call them by name before even we start planning and designing our humanitarian response. And we know for a fact, just like in any other war in history, a lot of the losses are irreversible. So the children who have been killed so far will not come back to life again, even when the war stops. Those children who lost their arms and hands and legs, they will not see them growing back on their little bodies in the future. They have to live with these missing parts of their bodies and cope with that if they are lucky to survive for a longer time. Many of those children will never see their parents again. They lost them. That's irreversible. And those children and everyone in Gaza will have to live with horrible and horrific images and memories from this war. And they have to live with that forever, all their lives. But still there is something that can be done, which is mobilizing our efforts and resources. First, to stop the war, do everything possible that we put all the pressure to stop this war and to let in the aids and the humanitarian aids get into Gaza without weaponizing aid, without putting conditions. It's unconditional aid. What is needed needs to go inside. These are the things that we can do and within our capacity to do as donors, as actors on the ground, as humanitarian actors involved in this sector. So it is our obligation and it is our responsibility to talk about it, to address it, and to take an action. And that was the drive behind this appeal that was launched with our friends and with the Arab Foundation Forum, with Taawon, with the other partners as well. And it is an obligation that we don't keep silence, we don't hesitate, otherwise we will be complicit to the crime. So we have to take an action. And we have to support Palestinians Also, the other point I want to emphasize that aid is important now, humanitarian response is important now, but on the long term, we need to support Palestinians to rebuild their houses, to rebuild their institutions, and to go back to the places that they had to evacuate from, and to stop this ethnic cleansing plan from taking place. And we can do that by putting the pressure on the international community and by mobilizing resources and mobilizing partners and building coalitions around that. And I think there are a lot of efforts have been put into that direction, and we're part of that. And I would like here to say that as philanthropy or philanthropic donors and actors, we have what I can call a privilege to respond very quickly. We're not tied to the complicated political agendas of the government and institutional donors. And I will be here careful and call that complicated political agendas. And we all know what does that mean. But at least we have the space to act fast and to shift our priorities to respond to the needs on the ground, while it might take a longer process for other donors. So the philanthropy here can play a significant role in leading this response and try to move or to mobilize other actors and resources. It's also to remember that supporting humanitarian efforts are important and vital. That's true. And this is what has been driving us behind this appeal and call for action. But on parallel, we have seen during the last weeks how millions around the world have been taken to streets, sent letters, signed petitions, and engaged on social media platforms, different platforms, with a unified message to their political leaders, demanding firmly to take an action to stop the war and to cease the targeting of civilians and to prevent the destruction of homes and hospitals and schools. Those people have been brave enough to put their voices outside there and marching in the streets, and they are our friends, and they are what we call all around the world the global citizens of the world, and this is a very strong message to us that the people can be moved by what they see on the news, on social media platforms, and they can be influenced by the activists, whether they are in Gaza or in the region all around the world. Actually, the fact that the Israeli military is targeting journalists and even their families in Gaza underscores the important role media plays in exposing the crimes being perpetrated. As donors and as actors in this field, we believe that it is equally important to support media-related efforts and initiatives that brings out the truth to the world. Also, it's equally important to support organizations dedicated to documenting the violations of international laws and working towards holding criminals, and let's call them by name, the criminals and the perpetrators, to hold them accountable. This is also. These efforts are very instrumental on the long term, other than the direct humanitarian support that is needed now. But these long-term initiatives and efforts that have been starting, like we know that a lot of organizations are working on documenting and building cases to take the responsible and criminals to hold them accountable. And this is very important to ensure that such crimes do not happen again, never again, and never again to everybody and everywhere. Thank you. I will stop here, and thank you, Naila, and thank you, my colleagues and the participants. Yeah.
Thank you, Muna. Thank you so much. I mean, obviously, I think what you're talking about is so critical in terms of allowing people to have a bit of like a guiding path in terms of what are the various ways that philanthropy can engage and what are the various ways that philanthropy can contribute. And I just wonder if you would tell us just a little bit more from the perspective of a donor. And, when you're looking at kind of the prioritization of your strategies and prioritizing where your grant making needs to go. So obviously this is a humanitarian crisis. This has allowed, or forced rather, people to pivot a lot of what they were originally planning to do, for the rest of this year and into next year and beyond, into addressing this crisis. But when you talk about the flexibility, and I think that's a very key thing about the uniqueness of philanthropic capital, is that it tends to have the luxury, if we can call it that, in such a situation, of being flexible, right? And of being adaptable. So if you can just talk a little bit about what it takes to empower that flexibility and to actually implement that flexibility. What does it take in terms of risk taking? What does it take in terms of, how would you talk to other fellow donors to talk about how you can do this kind of, this kind of pivoting?
Yeah. Thank you, Naila. Actually, if I go back a little bit to the Asfari Foundation and explain that there is a legacy that the foundation has been investing and working to build towards supporting civil society organizations in the Levant area, to have the front seat and to have the agency to respond to the needs on the ground, whether it's humanitarian or long-term development goals and agendas. So building that network of partners and building these connections all through the years enabled us to tap directly into the existing resources and existing partnerships. This action for call for action that was formulated within the first days, actually, is an example of how agile we can be. And it didn't take us a lot of effort to connect and to bring people together, because as like-minded organizations and foundations, we have the history of working together, and we know people, whether on a personal level or a professional level or institutional level. So we mobilized each other and we connected. And actually, it's not only this coalition. There are other efforts that have been done by international organizations and by other donors who were able to shift their priorities to respond to the needs on the ground. And to be honest, this is not the first crisis that the region is facing. We're always taken by surprise by different humanitarian situations, whether it's an environmental one, it's a natural disaster like what we have seen in Morocco and Libya a few months ago, or whether it is man-made like conflicts and wars. And so and the war in Syria, for example, or the conflict inside Syria for more than 10 years so far, the number of refugees and the internal complications there. We have been involved heavily in that, supporting civil society to advocate, to respond, and there are different ways to be to intervene there. It's if one donor can have the ability to mobilize massive resources to do humanitarian response and aid, others can support advocacy efforts, legal efforts, documentation, media, for example, or investing in general in the infrastructure of the civil society organizations. All these efforts will contribute to the larger movement of basically achieving what we all want by the end of the day, is to have a better future for our region and the coming generation. And we're all after peace, we're all after living together and building our communities. It's the way to that, to achieve that goal, seems to be full of complications and challenges, and it's our role to empower the communities and the people around that. And it's within forums like the Arab Foundation Forum and other platforms, we get the opportunity to learn from each other's experience and to influence each other. And sometimes it's really important to be around the table with other actors to learn from their experience, how they engage, how they respond. And many times we were really inspired by the partners and the other actors. So networking and creating these platforms, I think, is also as essential and important.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. And I think the key takeaway also from what you're saying is that it's not just a question of the kind of immediate response and the thinking around resource mobilization in an immediate sense, but also looking a little bit more systematically as into what building these partnerships and relationships can do to help mitigate future issues and also to help address future issues. And to remember that what we're looking at is a very layered and very complex situation. Yeah. Go ahead.
Just to close with that it's important when we work in responding to any kind of crisis, and that we need to understand the history and the political elements of it's important to abide by the humanitarian laws and to be impartial and to be, but that doesn't mean that we don't understand the political context, and we need to contribute to all the efforts of making sure that there are just solutions on the long term, and bring the voices of local communities and the aspirations of people. Or in the case of the Palestinians, for example, it is their aspiration as a nation to self-determination and to live in peace and to have all control over their lives and future. And without a long-term just solution, political solution in the horizon, I think we will keep seeing these conflicts all
Absolutely.
over. We can act right now, we can work, we can have our plans, but it is important that we are aware politically of the context and take a stand. You cannot just, being impartial doesn't mean that you don't take side when it's time to speak out and when there are violations, and you cannot be neutral. I think being impartial doesn't mean being neutral, and neutrality sometimes means that you're part of the problem.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Muna. I think what's incredible is really, from my perspective, from AFF's perspective, the fact that, we really are, we did all of this because of this one text message you and I shared. Muna and I had just spent a few days together in Nairobi at the Wings Forum, this beautiful, incredible gathering of people from all over the sector. And then I headed off to Riyadh for MENA Climate Week, and Muna headed back to London. And overnight, I landed in Riyadh, and we were literally texting each other like, what just happened and what are we going to do about it? So yeah, thank you. I'm going to turn to Aida. to talk a little bit from now the perspective of, what largest Palestinian foundation, been working on the ground in Palestine, whether in the West Bank or in Gaza and around the country, rather, actually. And just to talk us through a little bit from now the perspective of an implementing organization, right? That's not only a grant maker, but is also implementing programs and has really sort of taken on the huge task of addressing this issue from various different perspectives. So in addition to the humanitarian aid itself, Taawon has also looked forward and seen, Muna talked a little bit about some of the fallout of this, which is this entire generation of orphaned children who are going to need support for the rest of their lives. I mean, we're talking about, the average age of fatalities, child fatalities in Gaza over the last 6 weeks has been 5 years old. 50% of Gaza's population is are children. So Taawon took it on, upon themselves to also look forward, and in the midst of trying to figure out how to support people who are currently being murdered, they also looked forward into how do we support these kids who stay and then have no one to take care of them. So I'm just going to ask Aida, first of all, hi. I know that you are so incredibly exhausted and has just been Aida and I have talked almost every single day since October 7th. Because in addition to being colleagues, we're also very close friends, and she's like my family. And we've been checking in on each other every single day to make sure that we're okay and that she's okay. And that task that you've undertaken is really incredible. And the work that you guys have done is incredible. And, I just want you to talk a little bit about what you guys have been going through, what your thinking is, what your future plans are looking like, and what people can do to support.
Great. Thank you, Naila, and thank you to the AFF Foundation's Forum for giving us this platform, and to Muna for bringing us together so quickly. What I'll do is I'll give first a little bit of background about Taawon for those who don't know who we are, and then I'll get into what we're doing now and what we've done in the past and how we're already planning for what's to come, because I think conversations about the day after the bombs stop is a big part of what all of us in the sector now are also focusing on. So for those who don't know, Taawon Welfare Association is a non-governmental organization dedicated to promoting the steadfastness of Palestinians in Palestine. We were founded and registered in Geneva in 1983, so we've been doing this for 40 years. And we currently have offices in Amman, which is where I'm based, as well as in Ramallah, Jerusalem, Gaza, and Beirut. In Beirut, we also work with the Palestinian refugee camps in Lebanon. We also have a sister entity in the UK, so Welfare Association UK. And our mission has always been to make a distinguished contribution toward furthering the progress of Palestinians, preserving their heritage and identity, supporting their living culture, and building a civil society. And so, we were celebrating this year 40 years of supporting and focusing on empowering the Palestinian individual. And that hasn't changed. I mean, what makes Taawon perhaps unique in comparison to other NGOs. So we are an impact-driven collaboration of an ever-growing network of members, partners, donors, and change agents. So we're not just the typical, let's say, NGO that aim, to empower the Palestinian people. And that has always had a humanitarian component. I wish I could say that that we can only focus on development and being, of course, focus on being impact driven. But we always have known that when there is a need for us to go into emergency mode, that we always have to keep that part, working, because this, for example, in the last 10 years is our 9th appeal for Gaza. So just for Gaza, this is our 9th humanitarian appeal in the last decade. So we've been working in Gaza for 37 out of the 40 years. And I mean, the way Taawon in general, our work is always to work through our partners. So through our civil society organization partnerships, what we do is, under normal circumstances, work on development programs, which, on another day I can tell you more about. But once we go, once we declare that we're in an emergency status, as we did on October 7th, and then, we immediately mobilize our network of partners, already existing partners, and we start working with them on how can we have immediate impact on the ground. So I'm happy to say that right now in Gaza, we're working with 12 of our partners in Gaza. And what we've done is, I can, just give the latest update. So backtracking to, I think it was the third day of the attacks, the team was, knew immediately, what do we need to do? First thing we did was we went out and purchased 17,000 liters of fuel when fuel was still available, and immediately distributed that to the hospitals and ambulances. So because, now as we can see, that's, the first thing to go and look at what's happening to the hospitals. Ambulances can't even get to the sites of attacks. Water wells, everything is now, even the aid coming into Gaza doesn't have enough fuel to distribute the aid that's getting in. So that's definitely one of the most essential needs. We've supported about 10,000 families with food and basic needs, hygiene kits, dry food items, around 23,000 families with drinking water. And we've supported, when there were medical supplies within Gaza, we were able to support 2 of the Aida hospitals with medical equipment and supplies. And one of the things that's ongoing, and again, building on our existing partnerships, because we work in the agricultural sector in both the West Bank and Gaza, is that we are working with small farmers in Gaza who would usually export their fresh produce outside of Gaza. What we're doing is purchasing it from them and distributing it to the displaced families in Gaza. And just to give you an idea of how things are working. So I mentioned we're working with 12 partners right now. These are partners that we have worked with before. Well, the way we are set up is because we have, a team in Gaza who, as difficult it is at times to communicate with them, they are coordinating with our partners on the ground. And immediately when we purchase, whether from local suppliers, from the small farmers, what we do is we immediately purchase, package, distribute. So that's what we're doing. And what we are coordinating with the the health cluster group, the logistics cluster group, the education cluster groups, we are part of those. And what we do also to avoid redundancy, we are distributing to the non-UN shelters. So the governmental schools that have become shelters, the community centers that have become shelters. So there's no fear of redundancy. If anything, there's such a need for everything right now that it can never be enough. And this is also to say that while we are, like the majority, I think, of those working in Gaza trying to also bring in supplies through Egypt, we're not waiting on that. We have enough going on in Gaza. We are also trying to purchase and bring in non-food items and medical supplies and so on. But I'm pleased to say that we've been able to have quite an impact and will continue to do so with through our network and suppliers. And I'll move on to, well, just because we get asked this question a lot. So because we are set up in Gaza, we are able to transfer funds to Gaza. So we have our, it's an internal transfer, first of all, for Taawon because of our office there. And then because we also have, we're working with partners that we've worked with before. We make the agreements, we have the support of our office here, our team in Ramallah, and then make the transfers to our partners in Gaza into their bank accounts. And then through Bank of Palestine, they are able, with difficulty, but they are able to access their funds. So I think it's now 1 to 2 hours a day at most that they are. But the point is that the partners are also receiving, their payments from us in order to be able to do the work on the ground. So this.
So this is this is a really critical piece because everybody asks that, right? Yeah. Everybody wants to know, are the banks working? Like just a very simple day-to-day logistical question. Yeah. And so your answer is that there is some capacity for that on a daily basis.
In the south of Gaza, there is very little capacity, but again, because we're already set up. Those who, because we've already been working with these partners and we have, we're able to transfer to them because we've transferred to them before, it's doable. So This is where I think having that, history, those relationships, the infrastructure set up, between us, it makes this possible in emergency situations.
Right.
So that's about what we're doing on the ground now with Appeal. If you'd like, I'll move on to what we're planning for, from now, based again on our past experience. So we've been working in Gaza, like I said, for 37 years, and we've done so much work from, supporting the educational sector, both early childhood education, higher education. We've actually provided around 9 hospitals with solar energy systems, which obviously now came, which helped those hospitals quite a bit with the fuel shortage. And I mentioned working in the agricultural sector, and we've also had 2 orphans programs where we have supported 3,961 orphans over the last 14 years. And I mention this because right now what we're doing is building on that experience. We already know that even though we don't have the exact number of whether orphans or the term, that we use in the sector, unaccompanied children, we know that the numbers this time, it has never been this bad. This is by far the worst we've seen. I mean, we know that even those who are trying to support others are displaced and are, need psychosocial rehabilitation themselves, and in addition to what they're trying to do on the ground, the frontliners, and help others. So for our orphans program, what we've done now is started an orphans fund, and we've designed that program to build on the lessons learned and the impact of our former 2 programs. Unfortunately, right now, I don't even know the status of the 3,961 orphans. We've unfortunately found out that some of them were killed in these attacks. We found out actually one through an Al Jazeera story that was done about one of the young girls. And even the partners that we usually work with, we work with over 16 partners, civil society organizations in supporting orphans. Right now, we're not able to reach all of them. So as soon as things, the tax stop, communication can be reached with these partners, we are ready to, map the situation and to start supporting orphans as quickly as possible. Based on our past experience, we are going to support the orphans in different ways to give them holistic support. And just that everyone knows, we use the definition that UNICEF uses for orphans. So a child until the age of 18 who may have who may have one surviving parent, so has lost one parent, or has no surviving parents. They might be under the care of their next of kin, so kinship care, foster families, as well as orphanages. We do not go into adoption, taking children out of Gaza. That is not, that has its own set of legalities that we as Taawon are not a part of. When it comes to the holistic care, education is the first thing, and it might be, private school tuition. It might be in public schools, but we also support cover the uniforms, books, stationery items, as well as tutoring in 2 to 3 subjects, extracurricular activities, summer camps, winter camps, recreational activities, because it's not just, the standard definition of education, but also all of the other activities that also become a form of psychosocial support to these children who have lost their childhood. So we have to try to find ways to give them a little bit of that back. We also provide health support in the sense of mental health support, as well as medical. The first few years after any of the, every time there's been a crisis in Gaza, we found that the first few years are where there are the most medical and, health expenses to cover the psychosocial rehabilitation and whatever surgeries, reconstructive surgeries, whatever may be needed, prosthetics. And then we also find that if there is a surviving parent or a next of kin, or a foster family caregiver, that we need to make sure that we're providing them also with healthcare, because how can they take care of a child if they need help themselves? So this is where I go back to saying our holistic approach. Lastly, economic support, basic needs. What we do is also make sure that whether they're in an orphanage or in a household, that their basic needs are covered. While we don't provide cash assistance, what we do is we cover using food vouchers, shopping vouchers, anything that the household needs, to make sure also that, the child, especially when it's, not their parent, their surviving parent that they're with, that they're not a financial burden on the family that is taking care of them now. So this is in regards to orphans. I've shared with our Foundation's forum the link for our Orphans Fund. And for $1,500 a year per child, you can sponsor a child for 1 year. We do support the children from whatever age that they start with us, from whether a day old or at the age of 17 until they turn 18. And then from there also, we will be referring them to other opportunities for, higher education, vocational training, startups. So the other tracks after they turn 18. So that's, I think, the main program that we're focusing on right now for the day after, as well as when it comes to food security and agriculture. So I mentioned that Taawon has been working in the supporting the agricultural sector, both in the West Bank and Gaza. And what we want to focus on next is, even while food is coming, and aid is coming in, we want to rehabilitate the agricultural sector, support, the rebuilding of greenhouses, support municipal water wells to be working again for all this, because we need to invest in the agricultural sector in Gaza in order for them to be able to secure food for the rest of the people. We can't only depend on the aid that's coming in. So those are the 2 programs that we have decided on. We are looking into the other areas that Taawon has worked in before. Education, how can we get children and university students back to online education as quickly as possible? Other programs as well, upskilling of those already in the labor market, quick employment, for those short-term employment. But these are all, from day to day, the situation is changing. So we're starting with what we are confident in. And then once we have more information, we will be getting into the other interventions.
Amazing. Yeah. I mean, again, like I think what you're highlighting here is that number one, these issues are complex and layered. They're long term. Just because we can mobilize humanitarian relief immediately doesn't mean that it relieves all of the needs, right, over time. And it's a lot. And I think what it also highlights, for me, at least when I'm listening to you talk, Aida, is that it's not, it's not possible for one organization to address all of the critical needs of those who suffer consequences of these kind of incredible humanitarian crises. And I think that's what's really important, again, when we talk about the highlighting of the role that philanthropy can play, is that everyone needs to know that they have a role and that they have a position that they can kind of contribute to, and needs that need to be filled. And I think for me, again, every time we have these conversations in and out of the context of crisis, it just reminds me again of really the key critical need for collaboration and for these kinds of conversations to happen at a much wider level and with much more purposefulness around what does it take for us as a sector to come together, right? Mm-hmm. So that we're not having these conversations about just highlighting what Taawon is doing, which in and of itself is incredible, but it's never going to be enough. And I mean, you've said that, Muna has said that, everyone is saying that, right? It's just, I mean, I'm looking at some of the comments that are coming in on the chat and some of the comments that are coming in on the questions that just continuously keep highlighting all of this is great. It's not enough. We're going to need more. We need more collaboration. We need more partnership. And so for that, we have 5 minutes left. I don't know how we didn't think to make this an hour and a half, bas ma'lish. We have 5 minutes left. So I'm just going to address some of the key questions that we have here. And then I'm going to ask Walid to please send the rest of these questions to our two speakers so that maybe we can respond. And we'll gladly also respond on your behalf. If you'd like us to, you can just leave us, your comments, and we can respond to these folks who are asking these very critical questions. But one question, for example, which I think is really important, Celine is asking about, from the current experience, is it more efficient to fund organizations outside of Gaza, which will have more logistical capacity to procure emergency items at the Egyptian border? So this is a really kind of very key basic question. Or is it more important to fund Gaza-based organizations or Palestine-based organizations, and understanding obviously that professionals working in Gaza need to also sustain their own needs? And what would you say today, right? Is it better to fund an NGO outside of Gaza getting in, or already in Gaza? So I'm going to ask Aida, if you could just quickly, like, really, I say that, fund everyone inside and outside, but I'm going to ask you to answer the same question.
Absolutely. I don't think there's, like I said before, I don't think there can be redundancy at this point, whether you are a Palestinian organization, international organization, an INGO. I think it's everyone, we are trying as much as possible to coordinate, collaborate. As I mentioned before, I mean, one thing on the ground, Taawon works, thanks to its partners. This is what we're able to do. We don't work alone. We've never worked alone from day one. As well as, so that's with our Palestinian CSOs on the ground. But on the other side, we are keeping channels open with the World Food Program, with, as I mentioned, the health cluster, the education cluster. We're part of, the meetings online. We have someone in Cairo representing us in Cairo at these meetings. So to keep the communication open, between, it's absolutely essential, crucial, because that's the only way we can help each other out. So whether in the West Bank, I mean, like I said, even my team on the ground in Gaza, they do part of the coordination with the partners, but then they depend on even our team in the West Bank to put together agreements and whatnot. So it's a joint effort. I absolutely agree.
Yeah. Muna, I'm going to ask you one of the other questions that came in through the question portal, which is, what's an example of a tangible action that you've taken, which is not necessarily an aid response? So I think that's a great question, actually. So
yeah, it is actually, and just a quick follow-up on whether to support international organizations or local organizations. And I would echo what Aida said. It's not either or. It depends on the donor's priority, the donor's capacity, and the existing network of your partners. And as long as there is a proper coordination mechanism and complementarity in the approach and in building partnerships, I think that can be achieved. And this sector has been, we accumulated a lot of experience over the years, and there are structures for coordination and for building these complementarities to avoid the competition, because that will come, that will happen, and we know it's part of the business. Sorry to say, but there will be competition over resources. Not necessarily that's completely a bad thing, but maybe it's an urge for people to excel and to prove that they're relevant and to improve their operations. So it might be seen as an incentive, but with a collaborative kind of mindset. For the point on the long term, yes, we are talking to many actors right now and seeing who is the best or within our capacity to support, where they can be involved in the media part of it. We're talking to some really active organizations in Europe and in the UK, because we work from UK. We are registered and we have our offices in the UK and in the region. Some of our partners, like Megaphone, for example, in Lebanon, they are an existing partner, and I'm really proud of what they are doing and what they are posting. I'm sorry I'm not mentioning everyone here. We don't have the time for that, but we have a number of partners who are already involved, and we have been supporting, and we are currently supporting for. Not necessarily for Gaza, but we knew that those partners are strong enough, they are in the right place. When something like this happens, they will take the right action. And that's why our approach at the Asfari Foundation is to give flexible funding for our partners so they can adapt, they can change their priorities, and they can address issues. There are a number of partners right now that we are engaged with, new partners who will be more focused on the legal sides and the media activities and initiatives on the long term. So yeah, there are some good work going.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, I think honestly, this situation and this conversation could go on for weeks. Right? I mean, there are so many different things that we can talk about, so many aspects of this that we can talk about. We have run out of time, unbelievably. And I have to join another panel now to talk about climate and COP28, which is coming up in about a week. So I'm going to wrap us up to say, first of all, we will respond to any of the additional questions and comments that came in through the chat. So please look out for some answers from us in a little bit. The recording of this conversation will be on our website in the next couple of days. So we'll make sure to share that. And then really just, we're having a second follow-up to this speaker series in a couple of weeks. The invitation will go out from the AFF team very soon. It'll feature our two other partners that we've been working with. The American Friends Service Committee, as well as United Palestinian Appeal, will continue to talk about this. As long as this goes on, we will continue to talk about it. We will not stop talking about Palestine. We will not stop talking about how you can help Palestine and Gaza, and free Palestine. So thank you so much. Thank you everybody for joining us. If you're celebrating, happy Thanksgiving. Be mindful. And we'll see you soon. Thank you, everybody.